Welcome to Dreamed It, Then Real Lifed It, the podcast where we dive deep into the journey from vision to reality. I'm Kelly Jackson, your guide on this path of self-discovery, transformation, and intentional living. Here, we explore everything from mindset shifts and personal growth to spiritual alignment and entrepreneurship, sharing insights, stories, and actionable wisdom to help you live a life in harmony with your dreams. Every episode will dig into what it means to not only dream big, but to actually consciously create the life you envision. Let's turn your dreams into real life. All right, guys, welcome back to the show. We've got a guest today, and I didn't tell you about this guest ahead of time because I didn't know about this guest ahead of time. This was something that came about, we'll get into it later, but I met this guest, and we're going to be learning a lot about him together. But when we first met, instantly, I leaned into my intuition based on this conversation that we had when we met at the art show downtown Baton Rouge at the Arts Council. He was saying some things that really resonated with me. He was talking about athletics. He was talking about art. He was talking about nonprofits. It all felt aligned. So I leaned in, and I'm really glad I did because this is going to be a great conversation. I want to introduce you to my new friend, Kelvin Kelly. Yes, we share a name. And before we get into the conversation, I'm going to pass the mic over to him, and I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about who he is, what he's doing, and then we're going to jump into the conversation. So, Kelvin, it's all yours.
Well, do I have to be known as the guest?
No.
Okay. Well, my name is Kelvin Kelly. I grew up in Baker, Louisiana. Before Baker, I grew up in Baywood, Louisiana. And then I moved to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So all B's, if you're keeping count. Baywood, Louisiana, I grew up in a single-parent home, raised by my grandmother and my aunt. So the two most valuable people in my life was my grandmother, my mother, and my aunt. My grandmother taught me how to suffer well. And my aunt taught me that you can always say that you don't have money, but you can have A1A credit. My mom actually taught me. She went to school, she had a job, and she took care of me. So she had 3 jobs in one. But she taught me how to persevere. And she taught me that what happens to you is something and somehow trying to get something through you. And so, and from there, I remember growing up and taking care of one of my mom's sister. Her name was Shirley Ann. And Shirley Ann had a stroke when she was 14, heat stroke, and she couldn't really talk well. But her favorite word was the F word, and it wasn't forgiveness. And so she would always get frustrated because nobody could understand her. But with me being the only one that didn't have a stable job, she became my occupation. And so at 12 years old, I was taking care of a 30-something-year-old woman, and learning the nuances of being patient, and learning how to carry a burden for somebody that couldn't carry their own burden. And I remember talking to my aunt one time. I said, what if she dies on me? And she gave me this weird statement. She says, God will never put anything on you that you can't bear. And later, my Aunt Shirley ended up passing away, and I would have to say she was wrong. That was too much for me to bear. And but then I discovered that it was okay to play again. And so all of my friends, when I was taking care of Shirley, would be outside playing, and I would be having a responsibility of being an adult. And I remember my first time ever running track and field, which later became my career. I never forget showing up the first day of practice, and my coach, instead of him coaching me, he just told me to go run. And everybody else was getting ready to go home, and I was still running. And and then he finally called my name and said, "Kelly, I want you can leave now." And then the next day, he repeated the same process. And so I would just run around the track with no intentions, no purpose behind it, just run. And so my first track meet, I'll never forget it. I was excited because I knew I was in better shape than anybody else because that's all I did was run. But that particular meet, I came in dead last. Um, and not just last, the last where they clap for you when you're coming around. Everybody else is finished and you still have another lap left. And I remember coming around the track, and my mom was taking pictures and clapping for me, and that was the most embarrassing moment I've ever had in my entire life. And from there, the next week, I showed up at practice, and instead of practicing, I went to the boys' room and sat on top of the toilet with my feet on top of the toilet and waited until practice was over and ran out and got in the car. My mom said, "How was it?" I said, "It was great." And she said, "Coach says I'm getting better." And long story short, one day I'm walking out from the bathroom, and there was a group of guys. They were doing these things, looked like obstacles, but they were hurdles. And he looked at me. He says, "Would you like to try this?" And I said, "I'll do anything to get away from that 1500." And so he began to train me over obstacles. He took something difficult and made it simple. And that was the beginning of my track career. So I'm going to give you a minute to talk and
Yeah.
just give you a synopsis, a little bit of who I am and what I do.
I love that. And I also love that you brought obstacles into this first part of the conversation, and that obstacle became the gateway for momentum and breakthrough and everything that you've built since. But you had to face the obstacle before you could, discover what was on the other side of it. And I love that. So this is really exciting. I love you sharing that background story. I'm from Baton Rouge as well, so also a B. And you had briefly mentioned that about your aunt earlier in our conversation, and what I picked up on that, and I said it to you then, and I want to say it to y'all here, is that you were being taught stewardship without even realizing it. You were really learning how to be in that role. And when I think about the things that you're planning on doing now moving forward, that's so important. The things that you were being taught and learning and that were building your character as a young man, really a preteen even, are so ingrained in who you are and the man that you've become that part of your purpose now is to embody that and to pass that on to others. So how do you feel about where you came from, where you are today? How much of an influence is that? And where you find yourself today, how much do you draw on where you came from? You definitely sound like I remember where I came from kind of guy. I'm never going to forget where I came from kind of guy.
Well, it's funny that you bring up where I came from. I'll never forget. I used to live on Avenue A by Southern University, and I remember one of my friends named Norman. He called me. He lives in Texas. He says, "Man, we came from a mighty long way since Avenue A." And during that time, when I moved to Avenue A, I would ride the bus to Park Forest Middle School. But my first endeavor of locating my school was Park Ridge Elementary. And the first day of school, I took the wrong bus to Progress Elementary. So instead of progression, I actually took a detour. And so my mom had to come to the school, pick me up, and take me to Park Ridge Elementary. And so my first day of school, I'm getting off the bus, and one of the guys who lived in my neighborhood, he stood in front of the door, and I got into my first fight. which later that guy became my best friend, and we're still best friends to this day. His name is Warren Tiger Morgan. But Tiger, he had the opportunity. We both grew up similar background. His mom was single, my mom was single. But on the corner of Avenue A was a lady named Miss Dean. Miss Dean was Tiger's grandmother, and so she became the grandmother of the neighborhood kids. And so every day everybody would meet at Miss Dean's house, and she was the pillar of the community, gave us the opportunity to dream, and it was the best looking house on in the neighborhood. So instead of showing people my house, I would always point to Miss Dean's house as though it was mine. And so one of the things that I learned, I'll never forget, a couple of my friends went to Episcopal High School, and they came and picked me up one time, and then they were going to drop me off at the house. And so I actually had them drop me off at Miss Dean's house because I was embarrassed and ashamed of the house that I grew up in a shotgun house where you can open the front door and you can see the back door. What was being cooked in the kitchen, you can smell it in the bathroom, and what was going on in the bathroom, you can smell it in the kitchen. And so it was those moments of being equipped with humility. And I always say humility is not thinking less of yourself. Humility is knowing exactly who you are. And for so long, I was running away from who I was because I wanted to be something that I was not. And once I began to understand that I was being prepared to be able to go in environments that most people would never get the opportunity to experience, but I was also called to lead those the areas that I had came back from, not to lower the bar for them, but to continue to raise the standard for them. And so those were some of the phases that I had the privilege to navigate and to operate that prepared me, I think, for what I do now. That from being in a room of the university that I attended, Arkansas, #1 track team in the nation, to being okay with going back to Avenue A and seeing my old neighbors and talking with them and spending time with them and knowing that both of those things shaped me. It was not just one area, that all those things add value to me so that I can reach all of them. And that's why my nonprofit is all noble, not just people who are born in it, but people who can become it. And so I think all of us have something that we can bring to the table, whether we are poor or whether we're rich. And a friend of mine once said, he said the whole part of living this life is that if you find somebody that's poor in any area, you make them rich in that area. And if you're poor in any area, find somebody who can make you rich in that area. And so I think all of us have those gifts and talent that we've been endued with. So
I agree. And what I also love about your story, and I find this to be true with others as well, is when you've come from a background where you've experienced either poverty or struggle or hardship or insecurity, whether that's food insecurity, financial insecurity, just any of those sorts of things. And then you live your life in a way where you end up on the other side of that, right? And you are living a life of abundance and wealth and generosity and all of these different things, but you've known both ways. That gives you something that not everybody has, because someone who has never known struggle, who has never known hardship, who has never known challenge, they aren't going to have empathy in the way that you have empathy having lived it. And there really is an advantage, in my opinion, to having really and truly lived and experienced both things firsthand, because you don't forget where you came from. And and when you see people who maybe look, I always say your current situation is not your final destination. And to be able to revisit these places from where you are today and say, hey, I was there too. If I can do it, you can do it. And to be the person who embodies this is what's possible when you tap into your full potential, when you believe in yourself, when you're not willing to give up on your dreams, and when you continue taking the next right step of integrity in alignment with your dreams, your vision, your goals. You can do it. You can, you're not stuck. You're not stuck there. And that's beautiful. And that is an advantage. So I want you to speak a little bit on how that's played out in your life, and if you agree with that, and if so, and if you don't agree, that's fine, but if so, how have you seen that play out in that way?
Well, I would say in a lot of areas, especially in the area of empathy, some people say empathy is I see you, but compassion is taking a step forward. Is I see you and I want to do something about it. I'll never forget getting the opportunity to go to New Orleans Fashion Week with a professor. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing here? But it was an invitation to experience something that later changed my course and my direction of which direction I would go in. And so they had two communicators, one from SCAD University, who was a professor, and the other one had just won America's Next Top Designer. And so when I saw them, I knew that both of them wasn't healthy. But they were speaking to three inner city schools. The inner city schools were local, Capitol High, Eskruma, and McKinley. And when I saw that, the thought that came to my mind was they can't multiply, but they can transfer. And what are the things that would be transferred to those kids? Would it be the illnesses? Or would it be the gifts and talent? And majority of the time it's both, because we produce out of our own kind. And when I saw that, I was like, it was something that went on the inside of me. Now that you know this, what are you going to do? Because if you have a problem with them being the communicators, are you willing to step in those shoes? And it sent me on a journey of going, I have compassion. And majority of those kids in those environments grew up like I did, in a single parent home without a dad, looking for hope. And if hope looks the same way, it leads to disappointment. And so I wanted to give them a different type of hope, that they could actually dream for something that, or get to the standard of believing something bigger than themselves. And so it sent me on that journey and that quest of going, am I going the right direction? And it seems like there is markers along the way that say, hey, keep going. I meet people all the time, and a friend of mine called it, there is divine appointments. I call it out of the blue, and so sometimes I meet people out of the blue, and it leads me to know that, man, what I thought was possible, it's not just possible for me, but it's impossible for other people. And so for me, the journey of that, and I think the fun part about it is that I've got evidence now. And so when I locate the evidence, it gives me this faith to be able to say, you know what, nothing's going to stop this now. And so being on here today, it's like, it's me being able to say, this is my yes, that I'm okay with doing this, whether good or bad or indifferent. But at the same time, this is evidence that I'm supposed to be doing this. And so I guess my ability to continue to communicate the vision and the direction it brings value to compassion for other people. And so I think if you would ask me, from my perspective of where I grew up at, it gave me a compassion to go, not only do I see you, not only do I know what you're going through, man, I have some how-tos to help you get out of it as well. So, yeah.
Okay. Absolutely. And speaking up, because you said my vision and everything, why don't this sounds like a good time for you to speak about your vision, because we haven't even gotten into that yet. So tell them what you're creating or what's in the works.
Well, it's funny. I was telling a friend the other day, I said it don't exist. And I'm excited to say that. I'm not offended by that. Actually, but it's been developing. I have a heart. I got an architect working on a building, now for a building that I don't know where it's going to be at. I have another gentleman who desired to develop an app for athletes, which that's where I came from. I have another group of people that's working on a shoe design. That's the art and design for me, and I just completed and finished my first book. And so these small windows into a world that don't exist yet that gives me hope for those who are going to come along. And so with that, I never really wanted to tell my stories, but now it's kind of fun to know that I helped other people with their dreams. Mm-hmm. And I think now it's people coming along and saying, "Hey, I see what you're doing, and I want to help." And speaking of people that I got the opportunity to help, that was a young girl. Her name is Leah. And when Leah was in high school, I said, "Leah, have you ever thought about being a model?" And Leah is a young Afro American girl. She said, "Mr. Kelvin, I don't think I can be a model." And so one day she came to me and she says, "Mr. Kelvin, I was thinking, I think I want to go into acting." And I said, "Leah, that's a great idea. I'm glad you had that." So she had to take some headshots, and so she began to do modeling. And it was funny to watch her along the journey. And so one day she called me. She says, "I just got a offer to be in a movie with Will Smith." And so she sent me pictures after the movie was over. And Will Smith is giving her a hug. And I asked her, I said, "Leah, why out of all the people that's on that movie set, one, why are you getting hugged by one of the greatest actors of all times?" And later, that led to her being in another movie. She was in the movie Sinners. And the same thing, I said, "Leah, not only you got the privilege to be in a movie with Will Smith now, you got the ability to be in a movie with Michael B. Jordan. How about that?" And then she got the privilege to be in the Super Bowl with Kendrick Lamar. And then she got the opportunity to do something with Chris Brown. And I said, "Leah," I said, "if you never do anything else, you got one of the greatest actors of the 90s, Will Smith. And then you got one of the greatest actors of the 2000s, Michael B. Jordan. Then you got one of the greatest rap artists of all time, Kendrick Lamar, and one of the greatest R&B singer, Chris Brown." I said, "But why you?" And I believe it's because she said yes. And for me to see that, it lets me know that I'm called to do it. Mm-hmm. And Leah's not the only one, but I love telling her stories. Because when I ran track, I never got to be a fan because I was always competing and everybody was my fan. But I think All Noble is going to be, I get the privilege to be a fan to people and watch them and dream for them. So I started an organization called All Noble Foundation, which is the foundation is where we're going to be generous from and where we're going to give and where we're going to serve and where we're going to use our talent at, which leads to a museum where we're going to preserve things. And I felt like there were some things in the arts that needed to preserve. I felt like there was something in the athletics that needed to be preserved. And the thing that I felt like that needed to be preserved is the word amateur. And there's a great quote, and it's one of my mantras: whatever happened to the amateur? They who would do what they love to do for free. They must love the toil and the sweat more than most people love the reward. And when I saw that quote, I was like, that's my heart. That I love doing this. And I hope I never lose sight of being an amateur because everybody's being trained to be a professional now. But the key for me is I think amateurism is so important. And so to train a professional football player how to be an amateur again, or to tell a movie star, hey, what are some of the things to be an amateur? is my bloodline and my lifeline, because I never want them to forget where we came from. And so,
One thing that instantly comes to mind with that, there's this saying, I'm not even sure where it originates from, but it's to approach things with a beginner's mind. No matter how much of a master you may be at that skill, at that thing, you still want to approach things with a beginner's mind, which means seeing it with fresh eyes, not assuming I already know everything. I'm already good at this. There's no room for improvement. There's nothing left for me to learn. It's like, but really? Are you sure about that? So, yes, I mean, yeah, I agree with what you said. I really love that. The other thing, obviously, and this is what I was saying when we had met and had this conversation before I invited you to be on here for this conversation, that was definitely one of the things that I was interested in, because as you guys all know, if you've been listening to the podcast, I've had several people in athletics. I love having conversations with people that are in athletics. Obviously, I mean, I'm an athlete. I'm never was a professional athlete. I'm an amateur athlete, but that's something that's part of how I identify as an athlete. And also, obviously, as an artist. And I agree with what you're saying. There are things that need to be preserved and that have the power to really impact people, like to be able to have all of that in one space and see how it's all connected, because those worlds do belong together. And so this is really exciting for me to see what that becomes and how it evolves. Another thing that, going back to the story you shared about Leah and her saying yes, one of the things that I say, it's like, it's got to be a full body yes. Not that little hesitant yes. Like, if it feels like a full body yes, you got to lean into that. And don't start second guessing. I mean, this is really where, just like I said, this was leaning into an intuitive nudge. And obviously, as we've continued to speak today, and even as you're talking here, sharing things that I've not yet heard, I'm hearing the same time you're hearing. It confirms that whole thing. And you said a friend called it a divine appointment. You call it out of the blue. For me, I call them soul contracts. I feel like there's some people that we've got soul contracts for. Before we incarnated on this earth, we were like, hey, at some point in time, we're going to meet. And I even said when I met you, I shook your hand, we were introduced, and I'm like, have I met you before? Because there was something very familiar about you. And we had not met before, but perhaps what I was tuning into, what was resonating that felt familiar, was the energy, the resonance, just realizing that. And that's something, you can believe it, you can leave it, you can take what's for you, leave what's not. You don't have to agree with everything I say, but I'm telling you how I feel. There's a whole episode on this, by the way, the universal language of energy. We speak energy. I mean, that's a real thing. And so that's something I feel like when I met you, just picking up on that resonance of realizing, this is another person who's really moving through the world, genuinely wanting to make a positive impact, wanting to help others, wanting to empower others to tap into their full potential and see what they're really capable of. Because we as humans are infinitely capable. We're capable of healing our bodies naturally without all the extra stuff. We really are. We're capable of creating from zero, like from nothing. We are creators. That's awesome. I mean, from the inception of an idea, that's literally just a thought you download into your brain, right? We can we can build worlds. And that's what's so cool. And I think that's what y'all know. That's what I'm doing. That's what I did with the festival. That's what I'm doing with Mis Hombres. Like, I'm a world builder. And that's what I recognized when I met Kelvin, is that he's doing the same thing. He's building his iteration, his version of a world. It's not the same as mine, but that's what he's doing. And so it's really exciting to meet people, especially at the beginning phases when it's all still being developed and you're ideating and you're having different iterations. The this festival, I thought I was going to talk about the festival today when I booked this. This is the day after the last day of the 10-day festival of What You Want. I realized that I got to let it seep. I got to let it steep a little before I come in here and talk about it. So this opens some space up for this conversation that he and I are having. But one thing that I will say about the festival is this. This was like somewhere between a pilot and a prototype. And there's only so much that you can imagine when you're sitting in your office or sitting in your art studio or sitting in your workspace, and you're imagining and you're journaling and you're sketching and you're drawing, and you can imagine something. But when you actually build it, and then people walk through it and you see where they stop, where they pause, what they engage with, which they naturally gravitate toward. Like when you start to see that, then you can really start creating different iterations of it from what the knowledge that you gain from doing that. So it's such a fun process. And it's fun to talk to other creatives, other entrepreneurs, other visionaries, people who are not afraid to say, this doesn't exist yet. That's actually one of the things I told Kelvin, is that with the festival, it's like, I really believe that if something that you want doesn't exist yet, then it is your job to create it. That's it's been given to you. The dream was given to you. So I'm excited about this. I'm going to hand it over to you and see what might have come up for you while I was just talking.
Well, you made a statement about from the vantage point of building something that don't exist. But also, I want to make a joke. You said, ask the question, familiarity. I always say all black people look alike, or most people think all black people look alike. But anyway, but no, in that space, one of the things that I have discovered that most people can recognize good. And the whole part of the word noble actually means a person who makes a plan to do good and they stick to it. And so even when it gets difficult. And so for me, I always wanted to build something, and I'll never forget, people used to always tell me how good I was in track, and I said I really didn't want to be a good track athlete. Just wanted to be known as a good person. And so that was when I was younger, and not much have changed. Even my weight, I'm still the same weight. The look, I'm still the same look. And the whole part was I just wanted to do something good. And whatever that looks like. But all noble was my ability to find it. And the thing that I found was I found myself. And so I had to ideate a lot of the people that were in my life over the years, because a lot of the things that I learned was from so many different high level, different individuals. And I had to go, out of all the things that they did was unbelievable, they still wasn't me. And so I had to fight for the last 20 something years, the ability to say, I still want to be me, and I guess some people call that survivor. I did something other than survive, and I call it a new way to live. And the new way to live is just to take what you have and realize that it was given to you to be able to share it with other people. And so the information that I've gathered over the last couple of years, it's been neat because it was my journey. And there was a couple words that really stood out for me is I love honor. So a lot of people in my life, I just tried to honor them. If you heard me earlier talking about my grandmother, my mom, and my aunt, but then there was leaders that was in my life. I tried to serve them to the best of my ability. And then later my dad, who wasn't in my life early, but I got to serve him. And one of the things I knew about that was, out of all those people I got to serve, men-wise, the one person that I knew I was supposed to was my dad. And no matter what he did, no matter what type of person he was, when I served him, there was a void that was filled that I can't explain to very many people, but I just knew I was designed and equipped to say yes to him, and I did. And I'll never forget, he was in the nursing home, and one of the ladies came in and she was complaining about his behavior, and she said, "You need to fuss at your dad." I said, "He's my dad. I'm not his." And and whatever he would ask me, and my dad early on, he loves to drink, and so I tried to stay away from it because I knew if he loved to drink, we have the same DNA. And so I remember one time, he came to me while he was in the rehab home, and he said, I would like a beer. And so late, my brother, he called me. He said, I think Dad want to get a beer. And my dad was getting ready to pass away, and I said, dude, get that dude whatever he wants. Nothing will hurt him at this particular moment. But if that will make him happy, let's do that for him. And so the part is the areas that I had to learn how to honor was some of the greatest things I ever had to do. And then also, not just honor, I had to learn how to step up when there was moments in time. So I guess that's the word valor. I had to learn how to be bold, and I had to learn how to stand up for what's right, and justice. And what I learned about justice is it's not what you do. And most people do justice. But the part of justice is when you can't do anything, that something is done for you. And those have been some of the markers in my own personal life that I had to look back and go, these are some of my DNA, some of my qualities that I have enjoyed, and all those particular names that I just talked about was not just what I did. All those particular names is what I call my kids. And so those are my love letters that I wrote to them when they were young. And so those are the 4 pillars of my heart. We got 4 chambers. Mm-hmm. So that is what oozes out of me, unbeknowingly of me and not even in intention. It's who I am.
So because that's who you are, I'm going to say this without knowing, and you can confirm or deny this, but because that's who you are, did that become the foundation for this foundation? Did that become part of the ethos, part of the values, part of the mission statement? When you were creating this nonprofit, how much of you is reflected in this, right? What is the mission of it? Let's say that. So what is really the mission of this foundation, the Noble Foundation?
Well, kind of like I said earlier, teaching people a new way to live. And out of that, that's the part of generosity. Mm-hmm. And so I was telling an architect the other day, I said, whatever you do as far as the logo, I want blue to be in the middle. And I said, because I always want to go back to generosity, because generosity opened doors that you can't work for, and it also it cleanses the palate. It purifies the heart. If you're giving something, you can't have a false motive if you're giving it away. And so, but the whole part for me was that part of my DNA. I just saw the value in that. And when I trained people in that, I saw what took place in their lives. One time in particular, let me just throw it out there. There was a young man that was in high school. He was graduating from Zachary High School. He went to walk on at Louisiana Tech. And we would have conversations about, where he wanted to be at. And he was a 5th string walk-on. So he came to me one day and he said, I told the coach the other day that he was showing favoritism to other athletes. And I said, what did you say? He said, I told the coach. I said, that's the problem right there. You told the coach. I said, if I was you, I would go back and apologize to the coach. And he went back and apologized to the coach. And in 5 weeks, he went from the 5th string running back to splitting time with the 1st string running back. And I remember the first game that he went to, he called me. He says, Coach, he kept, every week he would tell me, this running back, this happened, or this person. And then all of a sudden he's in the space where things are working for him. versus things working against him. And I had never seen anything like that before. So I'm overwhelmed at how beautiful that was taking place. And I'll never forget him calling me one day, and he says, I get to go to my first football game. And I said, where? He said, Boston. And just so happened the young man's name is Boston. So his first football game was in the city that his name derived from. And so we had a talk, and he went to that game. But he called me a few minutes before that, and he says, Coach, they messed up my financial aid papers. I can't go. I have a debt of $1,500. And so I said, well, I looked at the text, and I said, this will give your coach a heart for you. And I sent it back. 5 minutes later, he called me and said, Coach, somebody just paid my bill. And I know he was thinking that maybe I did it because he told me, and I didn't do it. Somebody paid off his bill, and he got to go to his first game. In that game, he averaged 150 yards rushing. So he called me the next Monday, and I held the phone while he cried like a 2-year-old baby that Louisiana Tech had offered him his first full-ride scholarship to play for Louisiana Tech. And he ended up winning Terry Bradshaw Award. So a guy who had no scholarship offers out of high school wins one of the greatest prestigious awards for a quarterback, Terry Bradshaw, for God's sake, a Hall of Famer. And he went on to play for the New Orleans Saints, get drafted by them, and later end up playing for the Philadelphia Eagles and playing in the Super Bowl. And by the way, his football IQ was pretty good, but his size and stature was pretty small. So he was 5'6", but he went on to play in the Super Bowl and actually fulfilled the dream of his. And he just retired, and sent me a picture of his son. He just had his first son, and just a beautiful story of, watching somebody's life take a life of his own, and then at the same time watching him learn some beautiful lessons along the way about honor. And so the honor opened doors for generosity for somebody to honor him. So beautiful story.
It's such a beautiful story, and so many things came up. So you said honor and then allowing somebody to honor him. What I want to say right now, because it's important to say, and everyone needs to hear this, guys, receptivity. You have to open yourself to receive. Look, at the festival, I told all of the collaborators for the ticketed events that we would split it 50-50, right? Because it was me and them collaborating. And after one of the events, I went to pay a collaborator, and they said, oh, you don't have to pay me. I would have done it for free. And I said, no. This is what we talked about ahead of time. And do you know how much I do for free? I love doing things for free. This podcast is for free, right? I love putting stuff out into the world for free. You also have to receive. Giving is great. Generosity is great. But it's equally important, and this is the divine feminine. Whether you're a man, whether you're a woman, it doesn't matter. We all have feminine and masculine qualities, but the embodiment of the divine feminine is to receive. So that's important too. I love that you mentioned that about honor. There's something else I wanted you to talk a little bit about, because I was really interested in this. The 3 T's. Your 3 T's, and then also Kelvin was sharing something with me before. It's a progression of photos that were taken by a photographer of him, and it's showing his process of how he starts his sprinting, like the takeoff block, or I'm not well versed in track talk. I don't know if I said the words right, but it's like showing different stages of him. And it was this really neat, it was storytelling, visual storytelling, and it felt relevant to what you were just sharing. And I was also going to say this. So the story you shared about this football player, the one he just shared, because you're far enough back from it, you got to share the story, the whole narrative arc, right? Because it's all happened and we're a little pulled back from it so you can see it as a whole arc. Sometimes, though, when we're living inside of something, you got to take a minute and you got to step back from it so that you can appreciate in your own life those arcs that are happening. You can't just be look, I'm all about being in the moment. You got to live in the moment. Like, that's all we have is the present. However, sometimes don't get that tunnel vision. Like, step back and really appreciate where you came from, the entire arc. Just like these photo series you shared with me, there's something beautiful about the journey, about looking where you started, where something began, the obstacles along the way, right? And then where you started. And that was the other thing I wanted to talk a little bit about. In these photos he shared, one of the photos he mentioned our holding patterns. And guys, this is something I do want to talk about a little, because we do have holding patterns. And when they live in our unconscious, they become limiting. They really limit us. So it is really important to peel back the layers and to become consciously aware of what our limiting beliefs are, what our holding patterns are, where and where. And look, your fascia is holding everything, whether you know it or not. Your body, your physical health, your emotional health, all of this stuff, everything is in your fascia. It's a complex network of connective tissue that is covering every cell, every bone, every muscle, every joint, everything in your body. It's fascia. And fascia holds memory. I just want you guys, I know I talk about this a lot, but I'm never going to miss an opportunity to throw it in here, because it might plant a seed for you to do a little more research. And I've got episodes on this, so you can dig and find them. But I'm going to hand it back over to you and see what you might want to share on those things.
Well, a friend of mine decided that they were going to do a photo shoot with me. And they wanted to show, like, I guess the business side, the leader side, and as I was talking to them, I said maybe I should do some track poses, and which I wasn't really thinking maybe this would be a good photo, but when they took the photo, I began to see the steps and the stages, or the phases that was important that I didn't take the time to pay attention to when I was running. And when I looked at it, I was like, oh my goodness, this is unbelievable. Because the first part of a race is you stretching in preparation. And so it was my upbringing of who I am, where I came from, my neighborhood, the people who shaped and molded me. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And then later it was me getting in the blocks. This is the part where you're setting your blocks, you're making sure that you had these small memories, and the small things are important. So it was the small phases that most people overlook, or the things that they don't think is important. I was going back and remembering that. And then the next phase was looking down the track. In other words, seeing that particular finish line and knowing that it's obtainable. Whether it takes a long time or a short time, it is obtainable for you and for other people. And then the next phase was the holding pattern. That's when the guy tells you, runners take your mark. You get down in the blocks, and then he holds you for a few seconds, whether that's 3 seconds or 2 seconds. And for me, another holding pattern, I told you about my mom's sister. Another holding pattern was my freshman year at the University of Arkansas. I just came off a great freshman campaign and one of the top runners in the nation, and came home to see my mom before I went to Atlanta to prepare for the '96 Olympics. And driving home on Groom Road, and I was in a head-on collision. A car hit me, and my natural instinct was, when I came to out of the airbag punching me in the nose, was to run. And the lady who was in the opposite vehicle said, could you please get help? Because she was pinned between the stern wheel and her kneecaps had popped off. And a life-changing moment for me, because I went over to the car and she had a baby seat on the front seat, but it was on the floorboard of the car. So I turned it over and I was like, please don't let this baby be dead. I don't know how it would function if it did. And when I turned it over, the baby is smiling at me. And so I picked it up and I brought it out of the car. The car is smoking. And then she had another child in the back that wasn't in the seatbelt. And he's screaming and hollering. So I end up going and grabbing him, and I'm holding him, and I looked down, and his leg was flopping because it was obviously broke. And by this time, the people from uh, the the Baker Advocate came out, and they grabbed the baby from me, and they was like, "How are you doing?" And I said, "I think I'm fine." And so the ambulance came, the fire department, and police department, and just so happened that's the community I grew up in. So everybody, a few people knew me, like the chief of police, he was there, and they was checking my body, and they rolled up my pants leg, and blood is rushing down my leg, and I passed out because I don't like blood, and and so they put me in the ambulance, and they stitched me up, and I was actually 2 minutes away from my house, and so they took me to the hospital and um, stitched me up and sent me back home. And I'll never forget that day because I'm calling the hospital, trying to locate the family and see were they okay. And my life is turned upside down because I'm thinking it's a possibility I was in a car accident that maybe have killed somebody or affected somebody's life. And my mom, she's trying to talk to me, and I'm just calling everywhere, hospitals everywhere, and nobody could tell me what was going on. And so my dad during that time, he was dating another lady, and so she came pick me up and took me to her house and let me stay the night with her just to get away from everything. And so the next morning I got up, and she said, "Could you do me a favor?" She says, "I want you to go to the store and get me something." And I'm thinking, I don't want to drive again. And she says, "Because you got to get back on the horn." And I had qualified for the 96 Olympics, and that was my first time a holding pattern. I didn't get to go pursue my dream. And so my dream, I had to watch it go by. And it prepared me for the next holding pattern. But I won't mention that unless you invite me back for the next time. Yeah. But in saying all that, I overcame that, and I went back to school. And 3 months later, first day of school, a drunk driver hit me in the back end, and I had to miss another part of my season of running. And so I say all that because that was my holding pattern. But my holding pattern taught me one thing: that passion doesn't leave, it grows. And therefore, it taught me drive. And so I want to close with that because I think all of us will one day have a holding pattern, and we can either let it, some people say, make us bitter, or it can make us better. But I would say we can either let it refine us or define us. And so I think my refining process was taking place. And I began to know that everything, whether it's a cell phone or a person, is given influence for a purpose. And if you find the purpose, you'll have unbelievable influence. And the influence is designed to be able to magnify your generosity. And so for me,
say it louder so the people in the back can hear. I love it. That's good.
And so those are things that develop, and I hold tight to the passion of maybe this is why I'm called to do it. Because I went through the pain that I won't allow to be wasted. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, that brings me back to two things. So this is transmutation. This is alchemy. I mean, that's essentially what he's saying. And speaking of, there was something you said that reminded me of a quote from the book, The Alchemist, which we all know is my favorite. And it says that it's best to listen, or the heart is never going to be quiet. So it's best to listen to what it has to say. And yeah, so listen, pay attention. So good. And definitely there's so much room for a second conversation. Absolutely. So I think that we'll definitely do that after you've gotten a little further with these plans, and you're still at a really fun design phase. Like this could it's the pure potentiality of what this could become. You know, you have a direction and you're still open to it becoming even better than you imagine, right? There's still this space for it to, the ideations, for it to keep growing and keep refining and really show you what it wants to be. It's not about us controlling everything. I think part of what this is surrender and realizing, hey, I'm showing up for this dream every day. And this dream every day, out of the blue, it reveals itself to me a little more, which is kind of exciting. So I will invite you to do this. Why don't you, because you do have a book and you do have this, lots of things going on. So why don't you give them some places where they direct them to where they can learn more and get involved?
One of the directions is All Noble Foundation is what I've been currently building. It's ANF dot former FRAMER dot website, and that's a way to get in touch with me. But also another way, I'm in personal now, so I'm not like do a lot of stuff on Instagram or, but I do have a cell phone number. My cell phone number is 225-772-4995, and I am still approachable. I wanna say this. I'll never forget a young guy that I had trained and developed. He was a hurdler, and he did everything to become a great athlete, but he didn't do the necessary things to be eligible to be able to compete on a D1 level. So he had to go to a smaller university. And I'll never forget, he came out to the track one day, and a lot of the high school kids was around there, and they saw him. And all of a sudden I look up, and it's the whole team coming to talk to him. And I thought to myself, golly, because I've trained other athletes that has been 10 times better than him. But for him, I thought he was vulnerable because he didn't reach his goal, and he was approachable because he was still at it. And I said, I want to be that, because to watch the influence of those kids and how they came up to him, it inspired me to go, that's what I want to be like. In other words, I don't want to be too high that I'm not approachable. But I also want to know that I do have weaknesses, and I'm vulnerable, and there are some goals that I set. I didn't make the Olympic team, but I did try out for it. I didn't accomplish my goal. But that didn't mean that I stopped pursuing it. And I think everybody need to have somebody in their life that is not too far gone that they can't approach them. Mm-hmm. And also have the ability to be vulnerable, to know that they didn't accomplish everything and they're not perfect. And so that's one of my goals and one of my objectives. And so I gave you guys my number, and it would be great if you want to talk. I'm open.
I love it. Well, so thank you for being here. I really enjoyed that conversation and all the directions it went that I would have had no way of anticipating that we could go all the places we went, just of your personal experiences. So I'm grateful that you opened up about that. And I know there are so many little gems in there, again, that were not even things that I originally thought we would even get into. Yet he was dropping gems. So pick them up, guys, and get excited about this foundation. This is all happening in Baton Rouge. That's the thing. This isn't like in some other big city, some other place. This is happening right here in Baton Rouge. So that's really exciting because, as we all know, there's so many just exceptional athletes that come out of this city. And then art as well. Even though Baton Rouge isn't yet known as some big art hub, that's the direction that I know for a fact from lots of people in my life, and you confirmed it. Our orbits just crossed, yesterday, but there are lots of people in the city who want to see art, culture, all of that just really birth here in a brand new way. And so you're one of the people leading one of those movements, and that's exciting. And so the more of us that collaborate, that come together, that know we exist, that can all support each other in these missions, it's really exciting. So thank you for being here. And I do look forward to another conversation, because there's definitely more that we'll be able to talk about once you've gotten a little even further in your process. So I'm excited about that. Guys, tune in I'm going to leave all of the things that he said, those websites, his number. I will actually have that linked in the show notes, along with anything else we may decide is important for you to know after we finish recording. I'll have that all there for you. And until next week, thank you, and I'll see y'all soon. Bye-bye. Thank you for tuning in to Dreamed It, Then Real Lifed It. I hope today's episode sparked something powerful within you. Remember, every step you take towards your vision counts, no matter how small. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please take a second to hit that subscribe button or leave a review. That would be amazing. Or share the podcast with someone who's ready to bring their dreams into reality too. And if you're looking to dive deeper, connect with me on social media at Dreamed It, Then Real Lifed It, or at BE_what you want. Or visit dreameditthenreallifedit.us for more resources on aligning your life, business, and dreams. Until next time, keep dreaming and keep manifesting your dreams into real life. Love you, friends.